If you've gotten to the point that you are convinced that the media telling you that the US is doing awful with coronavirus cases and deaths, then this video is definitely for you. Hello, I'm Dr. James Bogash, publisher of Modern Health Myths, and today we're going to look at a study that takes a very interesting look at COVID deaths across the globe. Now, we always have to start with saying that any death is not a good thing, but the reality is that we have people die all the time from things like heart disease and cancer and diabetes, diabetic complications, things that are hugely preventable. And yet we don't, uh, they're not for some reason looked at in the same light as we are with COVID deaths. So um, one of the things that I hate the most is looking at case fatality rates versus infection mortality rates. Case fatality rates are used, basically case fatality rates are the number of people died who have been positively diagnosed with a condition. Early in the game, these numbers look terrifying because people who are getting tested are the people who are sick. And so those are people more likely to die. As you start testing broader swaths of the population and those people don't get sick and die, that case case fatality rate starts to go down. Infection mortality rate is ultimately a ratio of how many people died compared to how many people have actually had the condition. And that number just continues to plummet with COVID-19 to the point where it is at least on par with seasonal influenza. Nobody likes to hear that because we've been saying for forever that this is not influenza, but ultimately the infection mortality rate is not that much different than a seasonal influenza. So, but regardless, this particular study looked at case fatality rates. And when you look at case fatality rates, now granted this study ended at April, they took the data up to April 19th, and United States started seeing a lot of its numbers, but New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, they all had their peaks in March and April. So it may not be really a bad representation of the United States overall. But case fatality rates vary quite a bit throughout the globe. This particular study looked at I believe it was 9 countries, China, Germany, Italy, South Korea, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Spain, and the US. And the case fatality rates vary quite a bit. High end of the spectrum is Italy at 9.3%. Those are scary numbers. That almost 1 in 10 people who get diagnosed end up passing as a result of COVID-19. We know that that's not the case, but the US, Germany is at the low end of the spectrum of 0.7% fatality rate, and the US hovers a little bit towards the bottom, about 1.2%. Again, this was all as of April 19th. But what this doesn't take into account is that age does play a role in COVID deaths and cases and everything involved with that. It is not as strong as a risk factor as most people think, but largely with age comes other comorbidities, and that's why the association with age is there with COVID. So these authors ran some data crunching, and what they basically did was evened out numbers across these 9 countries for age, because Italy is an older population versus something like Germany had a younger population that was tested. So you have an older population that is getting tested because they're sicker. Your case fatality rate is going to be much higher versus a country like Germany that tested a lot of younger people who did not die. So it's, I guess you could call it cheating in a way, but these researchers looked at the age-adjusted case fatality rates. When they did that, everything kind of changed in the ratio. Some countries got worse, some countries got better, and ultimately Italy cut almost in half when you looked at the age adjusted to about 4.6%. The US stayed about the same at 1.3. Germany, on the other hand, which everybody points to, went almost or more than doubled at 1.5%. Switzerland, lowest of the group, 1.9% when they adjusted for age. Something, again, not many people want to hear because we think Switzerland has been doing some crazy things, but their age-adjusted case fatality rate is the best out of these 9 countries that they looked at. But so basically what it states is that based on death rates with COVID, the United States is right on par with everybody else, a little bit on the lower end, if anything, just a little bit above Switzerland, but still lower than other countries like Germany, China, and certainly Italy. But even then, there are variations between case fatality rates. Obviously, Italy at 4.3, Switzerland at 1.2. So we are still dealing with human physiology and a virus. Now, the virus, there are different strains of the virus. Some of the viruses are more contagious, less lethal. But that being said, these variations in age-adjusted case fatality rates probably have more to do with the virulence. So like some of the countries may have been hit with a less contagious, more dangerous version of COVID. The healthcare facilities of a particular country, how fast they can ramp things up and keep things under control, and the underlying health of the population, which is another one that nobody seems to want to accept or have a discussion about. But clearly, the underlying health of a population has a lot to do with the death rate. You can almost argue that has everything to do with the death rate, but that doesn't never enters into discussion as far as scaring people and making them terrified, that thinking everybody's of equal risk. So just wanted to put that out, that despite what the media would tell you, because their numbers are going up, ultimately the death rate of COVID in the United States is pretty much on par, on the low, maybe even a little bit on the lower end from the rest of the developed nations. As always, I will put a link to this particular study in the comments section. Make sure you like this video, share it with somebody who you think needs this information, and subscribe to the channel.